Hi everyone, Journal 80 today. I'll read it in just a second. It's about writing, but writing more specifically than I often do. This one is, it's like a spiritual successor of journals 35 and 75. So this one sort of completes the trilogy about assumed mastery. And so I assume I'm gonna upset a couple of people, but stick around afterward and I'll have some kind words to say about it and people. Okay, so Journal 80, Saturday, June 29th, 2024. I could totally toss that keg. Hi everyone. Lots of people believe themselves to be naturally talented writers. I would argue there's no such thing. All skills must be developed, and most development is strenuous. But not everyone agrees. Those who disagree the hardest tend to be young and inexperienced, or at least that's true in my experience. 19 semesters worth. That's how long I've been a professor, one short of a decade. And during that almost decade, I've had a lot of conversations like this. I'm a really good driver, a 20-year-old said to me. I'm a really average driver, I thought. I'd driven over 100,000 miles, perhaps 10,000 in the snow. I'd gone through 6 or 7 different cars, 2 manuals, and I was really good at Mario Kart. But driving is a complex skill for which any impartial appraisal would place me somewhere near the mean. I'm not bad, but nor am I really good. I learned my rank through experience. I've seen what real talent looks like. My grandfather won truck driving competitions. He and my father drove truck at the same outfit for 10 years. To the day. On that anniversary, my dad quit and became a machinist and machined, that's proper parlance, uncountable race car engines and counting. He's probably working on one now. And I've seen and heard his work in action, but I've also driven with him a lot. On 2 occasions, we drove coast to coast, alternating shifts. One of those trips was in the snow the whole way in a Ford Focus, and the difference in skill was enormous. It was probably comparable to the difference between me, the mean driver, and the 20-year-old whose boasting led to this long, silent period of reflection, which I eventually concluded with this question: how are you at parallel parking? Parking isn't driving, she said in a dismissive tone, which informed me she'd never parallel parked. That's like saying you're a good pilot when you don't know how to land, I thought, but didn't say. Instead, I asked, have you ever backed up a trailer? I've seen my dad and grandpa do it with ease, but I tried once and it's not easy. Backing up isn't driving either. Okay, well, how much driving have you done in the snow? The answer was none, because the last time it snowed in Stockton was 1976, and she was born during the Y2K panic. But no one around here knows how to drive in the rain, she said in a tone of superiority. I asked one last question. How are you with a stick? She didn't understand what I was asking, but it didn't matter, because nothing I said was going to change her mind, because no one can be argued out of their pride. At some point during my 19 semesters, I decided there are 2 kinds of activities. There are those in which amateurs falsely believe themselves to be talented, and there are those in which they know they're untalented. With calculus, Philharmonic oboe solos, and World's Strongest Man events, nobody watches and thinks, I could totally do that. But other activities do provoke that response. NASCAR drivers, NFL coaches, and professional poker players all cope with the public's assumption that they could do it better. The commonness of the claim, no, I actually win when I go to Vegas, is why the Vagal buildings are so huge. Cocky fools are easily fleeced. The perceived difficulty of any activity will differ from reality. Occasionally, we overestimate skills, e.g., rocket science, because of the cliché, but usually we underestimate, and often drastically, which leads to false presumptions of mastery. Just ask a teenage driver. But an even wider margin between assumption and reality is found in writing. People skim marvels of Western literature and think, I could totally write that, which is exactly as realistic as beating a Goliath named Magnus in the keg toss event, which is why every great writer must cope with the public's delusion that they could do it better. Okay, that's number 80. And let me just reiterate, let me iterate the first time in case I didn't do it. Really, I didn't set this up well in the beginning, that there's nothing wrong at all, right, with being young and inexperienced and terrible at because we all, like, in subject of driving, Dale Earnhardt went through a phase of being young and inexperienced and terrible and overconfident. And Dale Earnhardt Jr. went through the same phase, and Dale Earnhardt third and fourth and the 10th are going to go through that same phase of being young and overconfident and terrible because they lack experience. And like, I'm just as guilty as anybody at that. Maybe not as much with driving because of my experience, but in writing. But let's talk about it. In the words of Retrobird, quick little story for you. When I must have been like 10, and so I am a CJ, I'm Courtney Jensen. My dad's a CJ. His dad is a CJ. I come from a long line of CJs, and my dad and his dad almost always had the same kind of car when I was growing up. I mean, it was an El Camino phase. There was a Jeep CJ phase. The CJ, it's like a better than Wrangler, pre-Wrangler. And during the CJ phase, my grandpa let me drive his, and I nearly killed him and me. Right? So like, he drove to a site and then pulled off, and there's this big field. And back in the time when you could do this, it was in the 80s, we can do this, or maybe you're like 1990 or something like that. And I assume I was like young, inexperienced, like incompetent and confident. And so I assumed driving was just this and a pedal. And I just nearly rolled the thing. I mean, I have to say, I almost rolled backwards over. But my grandpa was not just forgiving, he had a sense of humor about it because he understood. I mean, he was patient with me, my foibles, because he understood that I was young and necessarily inexperienced. You can't have experience in youth. You haven't lived long enough to have experience. And he knew that experience is the only way to temper our confidence. And so I was overconfident and undercompetent. And he, again, had this sense of humor because we all go through these phases, right? We all go through the phase of screeching and like shitting in diapers. That's a phase, unless you're Kim Jong-un and you tell the world that, or at least you tell your fellow North Koreans that you've never, urinated or feces. Yeah, okay, everyone poops. We go through this phase of like shitting in diapers. And then we grow out of it, and then we enter a new phase, and we grow out of that phase, and we enter a new phase, and we grow out of that phase. But there comes a time where only experience, and if you're paying attention and gleaning insights from that experience, can we graduate from those phases? Once we go through puberty and whatever, and then, like, at this point, you have to have experience to continue and to be reflective on those experiences, to continue to grow. And I think the goal in life, purpose, right? Maybe the purpose or the goal or the best we can do with life is to learn how to be a better person. And put those lessons into action. We just continue to learn how to be a better person so that we can look back on yester week and yesteryear and our yester lives with the satisfaction of a cringe. Maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's also rewarding to cringe at our foolishness, because what that means is we recognize our, foibles and our follies and our growth. It takes growth to be able to look back at our own shortcomings earlier. So anyone who is hypercritical of other people's present shortcomings, maybe they're in a premature juvenile phase of life. And if they're getting kind of old, maybe they need more experience to grow out of it and be less critical. So I think cancel culture is sort of a juvenile stage in life where we think of ourselves as perfect and we're not having enough experiences, we're not reflecting on them, we're not gleaning insights out of them to have personal growth, to learn more and put those lessons into action. So I think looking back on our own foolishness as opposed to the foolishness of others is a quality we should all seek. But that's not new, right? That's like splinter in your eye. That's like biblical stuff. So let me just let's get back to driving. And another, in the words of Retro Bird, quick little story for you. I remember I think it was during the CJ days, the Jeep days. And so I was probably, again, like 10 or something. And my dad was driving this time. My grandpa wasn't there, but my whole family was. My mom is in the passenger seat. My dad's driving. I'm in the driver's side back seat. My brother's in the we're touring. I think it's a long highway drive. We're probably going to Astoria or something like that for a summer. And it's there's this Final Destination 2 accident. If you don't know the movie, you don't need to watch. It's not actually good. But the idea is there's everyone crashing into everyone, everything colliding with everything, except for us, except for our Jeep, just it wasn't my dad. He didn't have a premonition and then just sit there, be like, oh, I'm gonna let this pass, and then I'm gonna drive slowly and safely through. He just went through full speed, and I don't know what the right analogy is. All my analogies are gonna be old video, like a TurboGrafx shooter or like an NES shooter, Gradius or Life Force or something in a hectic, or Battletoads Level 3, where it's hectic and you just dodge everything. That was my dad driving. So I've always, since I was a little kid, I've had this example of what really talented, skillful driving looks like. And I know the basis of comparison here. I know I'm not talented, but it's just funny that in things like music or take a non-musician or somebody who's a beginner in music or any other sort of stage and have them watch a pianist, a concert, play Rachmaninoff, one of those huge hand pieces. And nobody is I could easily do it. Nobody thinks that. But in driving, people think it's just plantar flexion in the right foot. Just do that with the right foot and then maybe a little bit, and that's not drive. Plantar flexion on a pedal is not driving any more than typing is writing, and yet these activities lend themselves to assumptions of mastery. So that's what this one's about. And it's totally forgivable for people who are making those assumptions about themselves, as long as we continue to experience things in life and we continue to reflect on them and grow and cringe. I'll end there. I hope you're, a year hence, when this is yesteryear, that we have so many rewarding experiences between now and then that we can look back on today with a satisfying cringe on today's foolishness, because there's no reason to be overconfident today, because if we continue to grow today, we look like a fool. So I hope we all reveal ourselves to be fools in the future, and that those experiences are rewarding and not terrible. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye.